Imagine a drum so powerful, its sound could summon armies and silence storms. This is the legend of the drum that protected a kingdom from destruction. What you're about to hear is a story passed down through generations in West Africa, a tale of magic, betrayal, and one instrument that held the fate of an entire people in its rhythm. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you never think of drums the same way again. But before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the twist in this legend, you won't see it coming. Our story begins in the ancient kingdom of Ayodele, a prosperous land nestled between the great rivers and dense forests of West Africa. The kingdom was ruled by King Adewale, a wise and just leader whose name meant, "The crown has come home." And for 20 years, his reign had been marked by peace, abundance, and harmony. The markets of Ayodele overflowed with goods, yams the size of a child's torso, palm oil that gleamed like liquid gold, and fabrics so beautiful that traders came from kingdoms 3 months' journey away just to purchase them. Children played freely in the streets, elders told stories under the ancient baobab tree, and the sound of laughter echoed through every compound. But here's what made Ayodele truly special. In the center of the kingdom stood the sacred grove, a place where no ordinary person dared to enter. Within this grove lived the master drummer, an old man named Babatunde, whose age no one could remember and whose wisdom was said to rival the gods themselves. Babatunde was the keeper of Ayan, the talking drum, an instrument carved from the wood of a tree that had been struck by lightning during a sacred ritual over 300 years ago. Now, you might be wondering, what made this drum so special? Well, keep listening, because what I'm about to tell you might sound impossible, but in Ayodele, it was simply the truth. The talking drum didn't just produce sounds. It spoke. Not in the way you and I speak, but in a language older than words, a language that could be understood in the soul before the mind. When Babatunde played Ayan, the drum could communicate across impossible distances, warn of danger before it arrived, and even, well, we'll get to that part soon. King Adewale had consulted Babatunde on every major decision since becoming king. When to plant, when to trade, when to make peace, and when to prepare for war. And the talking drum had never been wrong. Not once. But one evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, something happened that hadn't occurred in decades. Babatunde appeared at the palace unannounced. His face was grave, and in his weathered hands, he carried iron. The guards immediately parted, because everyone knew, when the master drummer came to the palace without being summoned, it meant the drum had spoken a warning. King Adewale received him in the throne room, and what happened next sent chills through everyone present. Babatunde didn't say a word. He simply sat cross-legged on the floor and began to play. The sound that emerged from Ayan that evening was unlike anything anyone had heard before. It wasn't the usual rhythmic patterns that announced celebrations or victories. This was different. The drum seemed to weep, its voice rising and falling like a woman mourning her child. Then it would crash like thunder, sharp and violent, before falling into a whisper so quiet that everyone in the room had to lean forward to hear. And then, those who truly listened heard it, the message hidden in the rhythm. Darkness from the north. Brothers' envy. Blood on the throne. The kingdom will fall when the drum falls silent. The king's face went pale. You see, Adewale had a brother, Prince Korid. And anyone who paid attention could see the jealousy that burned in Korid's eyes every time he looked at the throne. But here's the question that haunted King Adewale that night: how do you stop a prophecy that's already been spoken? How do you fight a destiny that even the gods have witnessed? Prince Korid had always lived in his brother's shadow. While Adewale was praised for his wisdom, Korid was known for his ambition. While Adewale meditated and consulted the elders, Korid trained with warriors and studied the art of war. And while Adewale had the love of the people, Korid had something else, a burning desire for power that consumed him from the inside. For years, he had watched and waited. And now, he had found allies. To the north of Ayodele lay the kingdom of Zoka, a militaristic empire ruled by the ruthless King Musa. Zoka had long eyed Ayodele's wealth with hungry eyes, but they knew that as long as the talking drum warned of their approach, any invasion would be suicide. The kingdom would be prepared, armies would be mobilized, and Zoka would be destroyed. But what if the drum could be silenced? Prince Korid sent a secret message to King Musa, "Give me your army, and I will give you Ayodele. But first, I must silence the drum." Now, here's where the story takes a dark turn. Korid knew he couldn't simply destroy Ayan. The drum was protected by ancient magic and watched over by Babatunde, who never left the sacred grove unguarded. But every instrument, no matter how powerful, has one weakness: it needs someone to play it. And so, Korid devised a plan that was as cunning as it was cruel. He approached Babatunde's apprentice, a young man named Taiwo, who had been studying the sacred rhythms for 7 years. Taiwo was talented but impatient, frustrated that Babatunde rarely let him play Ayan, always insisting he wasn't ready yet. Korid whispered poison into Taiwo's ear, "The old man keeps you from greatness. He fears that your talent will surpass his. Why should you wait decades to prove what you already know? The drum should be played by the worthy, not guarded by the fearful." And slowly, like water eroding stone, Korid's words found their mark. On the night of the new moon, when darkness was absolute, Taiwo did the unthinkable. He crept into the sacred grove where Babatunde slept and stole the talking drum. But here's what Taiwo didn't know, and this is crucial: Ayan wasn't just an instrument. It was alive. And it chose its player just as much as the player chose it. The moment Taiwo's hands touched the drum without Babatunde's blessing, something changed. The drum went cold. Its voice, once clear and true, became distorted and hollow. Taiwo tried to play it, tried to make it speak, but only silence emerged. Or worse, a sound so discordant that it made his ears bleed. In his panic, Taiwo ran to Prince Korid, who realized with growing horror that simply stealing the drum wasn't enough. But it was too late to turn back now. With Ayan silent and Babatunde weakened by the spiritual severing from his sacred instrument, Korid sent his signal to King Musa: "The drum is silent. Attack at dawn." The army of Zoka moved like a shadow across the land. 5,000 warriors, armed with spears, shields, and a hunger for conquest, marched toward Ayodele under the cover of night. They moved silently, certain that the legendary talking drum that had protected the kingdom for generations could no longer warn of their approach. And they were right. Ayan was silent. King Adewale woke to chaos. Sentries who should have been alerted by the drum's warning were caught completely off guard. The northern border was breached within hours. Villages were burned. People fled toward the capital in terror, crying out that an army unlike anything they'd ever seen was sweeping across the land. The king immediately summoned his war council, but the news grew worse by the hour. His own brother, Prince Korid, was missing, and so was the master drummer's apprentice. And most devastating of all, when messengers ran to the sacred grove to seek Babatunde's guidance, they found the old man collapsed on the ground, barely breathing, his hands clutched over his chest as if his heart had been torn from his body. "The drum," Babatunde whispered when they lifted him. "Find the drum." But how do you find a magical instrument that has been silenced? How do you locate something that no longer speaks? King Adewale stood on the palace walls and watched smoke rise from the northern villages. His kingdom, the kingdom he had protected for 20 years, was falling. And the prophecy was coming true. Darkness from the north. Brothers' envy. Blood on the throne. The kingdom will fall when the drum falls silent. Every part of the prophecy had manifested. Every part, except the end. And that's when something extraordinary happened. A young girl, no more than 12 years old, pushed through the crowd of panicking citizens and royal guards. Her name was Amara, and she was the daughter of a market woman, nobody important, nobody with power or position. But she had something that even the king's greatest warriors didn't have. She could hear the drum. "Your Majesty," she called out, her voice somehow cutting through all the chaos. "I know where Ayan is. I can hear it calling." Now, you might be thinking this sounds too convenient, too much like destiny. But remember what I told you at the beginning, this drum was special. And its magic worked in ways that even the wisest couldn't predict. King Adewale had every reason to dismiss the girl. What could a child know that his scouts, his advisors, his warriors didn't? But when you're watching your kingdom burn and prophecy has already proven true, you listen to every voice, even the smallest. "How can you hear it?" the king demanded. The master drummer himself says the drum is silent. Amara stepped forward, unafraid despite the hundreds of eyes upon her. "It's not silent to everyone, Your Majesty. It's crying. It's been crying since it was taken." But most people don't know what a crying drum sounds like because they've only heard it when it's happy, when it's with its true player. There was something in her eyes, an ancient knowing that didn't belong in a child's face. Babatunde, who had been carried to the palace on a stretcher, lifted his head and looked at the girl with sudden recognition. "The drum chose you," he whispered. "Even before it was taken. That's why you can hear it." And suddenly, everyone understood. The talking drum, in its wisdom, had already prepared for this moment. It had called to Amara years ago, planted its voice in her soul, so that when this day came, the day it was stolen, there would be someone who could find it. But there was a problem. Amara could hear where the drum was, but the location made everyone's blood run cold. "It's in the north," she said quietly. "With the invading army. Prince Korid is carrying it at the center of their forces." In other words, to save the kingdom, this 12-year-old girl would have to walk into the heart of an enemy army. The king's generals immediately protested. It was suicide. They should focus on defending the capital, on evacuating the people, on preparing for siege. Sending anyone after the drum, let alone a child, was madness. But King Adewale looked at Babatunde, and the old man nodded slowly. "The drum must return to one who loves it, not one who seeks to use it. She is the only one who can bring it home." And so, in a decision that would be debated for generations, King Adewale agreed to let Amara go. But she wouldn't go alone. He assigned his most trusted warrior, a woman named Funanya, to accompany her. Funanya had fought in 12 battles and never lost once. If anyone could get Amara through enemy lines, it was her. As they prepared to leave, Babatunde called Amara to his side and took her hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. "The drum will know you," he said. "But you must understand, it has been hurt. Betrayed. It may not trust even you at first. You must remind it why it was created. You must play the first rhythm, the sacred rhythm that breathes life into all things. Do you understand?" Amara nodded, though fear danced in her belly. She had never played a drum in her life. As night fell, Amara and Funanya slipped out of the palace through a secret passage and began their journey north, toward the enemy, toward the drum, toward a destiny that neither of them could have imagined. The land between the capital and the invading army was a nightmare. Everywhere Amara and Funanya traveled, they saw the destruction left in Sokka's wake, burned homes, trampled fields, and people hiding in the forests, too terrified to move. Funanya moved like a shadow, teaching Amara how to step silently, how to read the land, how to know when soldiers were near before seeing them. And all the while, Amara listened for the drum. Its cry had grown louder in her mind, more desperate. Sometimes it sounded like a heartbeat growing faint. Other times it wailed like a mother who had lost her child. And with each passing hour, Amara could feel it weakening, its magic draining away because it was in the hands of someone who didn't understand it, who only wanted to use it. "We're running out of time," Amara whispered on their second night. "The drum is dying." Funania's jaw tightened. She had seen many things in war, but the idea of a magical instrument dying like a living creature unsettled even her. "Then we move faster." By the third day, they reached the edge of the enemy encampment. It stretched for miles, thousands of warriors, hundreds of tents, and at the center, a large pavilion bearing the colors of both Zoka and Prince Corid. That's where the drum was. Funania studied the camp with the warriors and came to a grim conclusion. "There's no way we can fight our way in. There are too many. We need a different approach." "What if we don't fight?" Amara said suddenly. "What if I just walk in?" Funania looked at her like she'd gone mad. "They'll kill you on sight." "Not if I'm offering them something they want." Amara's eyes gleamed with an idea forming. "I'm just a village girl. What if I tell them I've come to pledge loyalty to the new king? What if I tell them I know the secrets of Ayodele's defenses, that I've run away because I believe Prince Corid should rule?" It was risky. It was insane. But it was also the only plan they had. As dawn broke on the fourth day, Amara walked into the enemy camp alone, her hands raised, calling out that she had information for Prince Corid. Prince Corid sat in his pavilion, staring at the talking drum with frustration and rage. Taiwo had tried everything to make it work, every rhythm he knew, every pattern Babatunde had taught him. But the drum remained stubbornly silent, its surface cold as stone. "Useless," Corid spat. "Without its warning system, Ayodele should have already fallen. But my brother is clever, he's managed to organize a defense even without the drum. We're at a stalemate, and my allies grow impatient." That's when the guards brought Amara in. Corid studied the girl with suspicion. "You claim to have information. You're just a child." "I'm the daughter of a market woman," Amara said, keeping her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "I hear everything. Merchants talk. Royal servants talk. I know where the king plans to make his stand. I know where he's hidden the royal treasury. And I know something else, I know why the drum won't work for you." That got his attention. Taiwo, sitting in the corner nursing his bleeding ears from another failed attempt to play Ayan, looked up sharply. "Explain," Corid commanded. Amara took a careful step toward the drum. "The talking drum only speaks to those it trusts. You stole it. You betrayed it. Of course it won't work for you." She paused, then delivered her gamble. "But it might work for me. I've been around it my whole life. I used to play near the sacred grove. The drum knows my voice." It was a lie wrapped in truth, and Corid leaned forward, hungry for any solution. "If I can make the drum work," Amara continued, "you'll have your victory. You can use it to coordinate your attack, to spread confusion in Ayodele, to make my people think the gods have abandoned them. Isn't that what you want?" Corid and Taiwo exchanged glances. Then Corid smiled, a cold, cruel expression. "Fine. Make it work. But know this, child, if you're lying, if this is some trick, I have you burned alive in front of your precious kingdom." "Understood." Amara nodded and approached Ayan with trembling hands. The moment her fingers touched the drum's surface, she felt it, the shock of recognition, the flood of emotion, the weak pulse of magic that still remained. And in her mind, she heard Babatunde's final instruction: play the first rhythm, the sacred rhythm that breathes life into all things. But there was a problem. Amara had never learned the rhythms. She'd never been trained. All she had was the memory of the drum's heartbeat, the sound it made when it was happy, when it was whole. So she closed her eyes and played what she felt. Her hands moved across the drum's surface, tentative at first, then growing stronger. The rhythm that emerged wasn't complex or showy. It was simple. Primal. It sounded like a heartbeat returning to a body that had nearly died. It sounded like breath filling empty lungs. It sounded like hope. And then, Ayan woke up. The drum's voice exploded through the camp with a force that knocked everyone backward. But this wasn't the gentle communication it used with Babatunde. This was rage. This was a storm that had been held back too long. The sound crashed over the enemy camp like a physical wave. Warriors clutched their heads and fell to their knees. Horses reared and broke their tethers. Weapons fell from nerveless fingers. And the message the drum proclaimed was clear to everyone who heard it. Betrayal. Theft. Wrong hands. Ayodele rises. Ayodele remembers. Ayodele comes. But it wasn't just the enemy who heard. Back in the capital, over 40 miles away, King Adewale and his warriors heard the drum's voice as clearly as if it were beating in the throne room itself. And they knew Amara had found it. The drum was awakening. To battle. King Adewale roared, and an army that had been waiting, hoping, praying for this moment surged forward toward the north. In the enemy camp, chaos reigned. Prince Korid lunged toward Amara, murder in his eyes, but the drum's voice grew even louder, and a sound emerged that no one had ever heard before. Ayan was calling for help. And help came. Funania burst into the pavilion, her blade flashing, cutting down guards with ruthless efficiency. She grabbed Amara, who clutched the drum to her chest, and they ran. Behind them, Taiwo collapsed, his betrayal of Babatunde finally catching up to him. The magical backlash of trying to force the drum to obey had shattered something inside him, and he would never hear music again. Prince Korid screamed for his warriors to stop the girl, to kill her, to do whatever it took to keep that drum silent. But it was too late. The talking drum had found its voice again, and with each rhythm Amara played as she ran, it grew stronger. By the time King Adewale's army reached the battlefield, the enemy was in complete disarray. The drum's voice had broken their formation, shattered their morale, and turned what should have been their moment of victory into a rout. And when King Musa of Zoka saw the tide turning, saw Prince Korid abandoned by the very magic he tried to steal, he made the pragmatic choice. He retreated, leaving Korid to face his brother's justice alone. The battle that followed was swift. Prince Korid, abandoned by his allies and betrayed by his own ambition, was captured by his brother's forces. They say when King Adewale looked into Korid's eyes, he saw not a brother but a stranger consumed by envy. Korid was exiled to the farthest reaches of the kingdom, stripped of his title, his name, and his legacy. He would spend the rest of his days as a warning, proof that power sought through betrayal brings only ruin. But the true hero of this story wasn't the king, wasn't the warrior Funania, and wasn't even the master drummer Babatunde, though he recovered and lived another 20 years. The hero was Amara, the market woman's daughter who could hear what others couldn't, who walked into the heart of darkness with nothing but faith and courage, and who reminded an ancient, magical drum why it had been created in the first place, not as a weapon, but as a voice for those who needed to be heard. King Adewale honored Amara by making her Babatunde's new apprentice, and she became the first female master drummer in the kingdom's history. Under her hands, the talking drum spoke not just of warnings and battle, but of joy, of harvest, of love, and of peace. They say that even today, if you travel to that part of West Africa and listen carefully, you can still hear echoes of Ayan's voice on the wind, a reminder that the most powerful magic isn't found in weapons or armies, but in the courage of those who stand up when everything seems lost. The kingdom of Ayodele prospered for generations after, and the talking drum never fell silent again. Because it had learned an important lesson that day, it had learned to choose not just masters, but friends. And that's the legend of the talking drum that saved the kingdom. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss another African legend explained. Drop a comment below telling me which legend you want to hear next. And remember, sometimes the smallest voice carries the most powerful message. Until next time, keep listening.